The studio lights burned brighter than usual, their heat pressing against Trevor Noah's skin as he leaned into his signature grin. The audience roared with laughter, their applause a familiar rhythm that had carried him through countless nights on The Daily Show. But tonight, something felt off. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, and Trevor's eyes darted to the guest chair where Karoline Leavitt sat, her posture rigid, her smile sharp as a blade. She was a rising political commentator, known for her unrelenting style, and tonight, she promised a big reveal. Trevor had laughed it off backstage, but now, as her gaze locked onto his, a cold unease coiled in his chest. "Trevor," she began, her voice slicing through the applause, "there's something your audience deserves to know." The crowd hushed, and Trevor's heart thudded. This wasn't a joke. This was a storm about to break. Trevor had always been a master of deflection, his quick wit a shield forged in the tough streets of Soweto, where he'd learned to navigate a world that didn't always welcome a mixed-race kid. Born to a black Xhosa mother and a white Swiss father during apartheid, he turned pain into laughter, transforming his scars into stories that connected millions. But beneath the charm, Trevor carried secrets, not the kind Karoline might expect, not scandals or skeletons, but quiet burdens he'd never shared. Like the nights he'd spent as a teenager, sneaking food from his mother's meager pantry to feed a homeless man who slept near their shack. Or the letters he still wrote to his late grandmother, confessing fears he couldn't voice aloud. These were the pieces of himself he guarded, not out of shame, but because they felt too raw, too sacred for the world's scrutiny. As Karoline leaned forward, her eyes gleaming, Trevor braced himself. What did she know? And why did it feel like this moment could unravel everything? Karoline's voice cut through the silence. "Trevor, you've built a career on being the everyman, the guy who gets it. But you've been hiding something extraordinary." The audience leaned in, their anticipation a living thing. Trevor's mind raced. Was this about his charity work? The schools he'd quietly funded in South Africa? Or something deeper, something he hadn't even admitted to himself? Karoline pulled out a stack of papers, her smile softening, and Trevor's stomach dropped. "These," she said, holding them up, "are emails. Hundreds of them. From people you've never met, thanking you for acts of kindness you never spoke about." The crowd gasped, and Trevor's breath caught. This wasn't an exposé of shame, it was something else entirely. Karoline continued, her tone shifting from accusation to awe. "You've been paying medical bills for strangers, sending kids to college, even helping families keep their homes. And you never told a soul." The studio erupted in applause, but Trevor felt exposed, stripped bare under the lights. He'd never meant for anyone to know. Those acts weren't for praise, they were his way of repaying a debt to the world that had lifted him from nothing. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, "You don't do good to be seen, Trevor. You do it because it's right." But Karoline wasn't done. She turned to the audience, her voice trembling with emotion. "There's one story in particular. A woman named Maria Alvarez, a single mother from Chicago. Trevor, you paid for her son's heart surgery last year. He's alive today because of you." A screen behind them flickered, and there was Maria, tears streaming down her face, holding a photo of a smiling boy. The audience sobbed, and Trevor's throat tightened. He wanted to run, to escape the weight of their eyes, but his legs wouldn't move. Instead, he stood, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't want this to be a thing." The audience quieted, hanging on his words. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to think no one cares. I didn't want anyone to feel that way if I could help it." Karoline's eyes softened, and for the first time, Trevor saw not a rival, but someone who understood. She reached into her folder and pulled out a single letter. "This is from you," she said, her voice steady. "You wrote it to Maria, telling her she was strong, that she was enough. You didn't just save her son, you gave her hope." Trevor's eyes burned, and he looked away, unable to meet the crowd's gaze. The applause swelled again, but it felt distant, like a wave crashing far from shore. All he could see was Maria's face, her son's smile, and the memory of his own mother's hands, worn from years of sacrifice. Then came the twist Trevor never saw coming. Karoline stood, her voice rising. But this isn't just about Trevor. It's about all of us. She turned to the audience, her eyes fierce. Trevor's kindness started a chain. Maria, after her son recovered, began volunteering at a shelter. One of the kids she helped, a teenager named Jamal, just got a scholarship to college. And it's not just them. People Trevor helped have gone on to help others, creating a ripple effect across the country. The screen shifted, showing faces, men, women, children, each sharing stories of kindness inspired by Trevor's quiet generosity. A man in Texas who started a food bank. A teacher in New York who paid for her student supplies. The audience was weeping now, and Trevor felt something shift inside him, a realization as profound as it was humbling. His small acts had grown into something bigger than himself. The emotional climax came when Karoline stepped closer, her voice soft but clear. Trevor, you thought you were alone in this. But you're not. You showed us what humanity can do. She gestured to the audience, and they rose, not just clapping but shouting, chanting his name. Trevor's vision blurred with tears, and for a moment, he was back in Soweto, a boy hiding his fears behind a smile. But now, he wasn't hiding. He was seen, not for his fame, but for his heart. He stepped forward, his voice breaking. If I did anything right, it's because I learned from people like my mom, like all of you. We're not here to just take up space. We're here to lift each other up. The crowd roared, and Trevor felt a weight lift, as if the secrets he'd carried were no longer burdens, but bridges to something greater. Karoline, to everyone's surprise, extended her hand. I came here thinking I'd expose you, she admitted, her voice raw. But you exposed something bigger, the best in all of us. Trevor took her hand, and the audience cheered, not just for him, but for the truth they'd all witnessed, that kindness, no matter how small, could change the world. Backstage, after the cameras stopped rolling, Trevor sat alone, staring at the letter from Maria. He traced the words he'd written, words he'd meant only for her. You are enough. And for the first time, he believed those words for himself. The show aired the next night, and the response was unlike anything The Daily Show had seen. Social media exploded with #TrevorChain, as people shared their own stories of kindness, inspired by the broadcast. In small towns and big cities, strangers paid for each other's groceries, volunteered at shelters, wrote letters to those who felt forgotten. Trevor watched it unfold, his heart full. He'd stormed off the stage that night, not in anger, but in overwhelm, needing a moment to process the truth. He wasn't alone. None of them were. Months later, Trevor stood at a community center in Chicago, Maria and her son by his side. The room was packed with people whose lives had been touched by the chain of kindness that began with a single act. Trevor looked out at them, his voice steady now. We don't need to be famous to make a difference, he said. We just need to care. The crowd cheered, but it was Maria's quiet words that stayed with him. You gave us more than money, Trevor. You gave us hope. As he hugged her, Trevor felt his mother's presence, her lessons alive in this moment. The world was messy, divided, but here, in this room, humanity shone brighter than any studio light. The story of that night became a beacon, a reminder that one person's compassion could spark a movement. Across the USA and beyond, people carried the torch, proving that kindness wasn't just a gesture, it was a revolution. And Trevor, once a boy who felt invisible, became a symbol of what was possible when humanity chose to see each other, to act, to love. The message was simple, yet profound: no act of goodness is ever wasted. It grows, it spreads, it heals. And in a world desperate for hope, that was enough to change everything. The moral of the story is that small acts of kindness, done selflessly and without expectation of recognition, can create a ripple effect that transforms lives and inspires others to do the same. proving that the power of humanity lies in our ability to care for one another.